You've seen the headlines. Ransomware is everywhere. From a massive gas pipeline shutdown to meat plants to school districts to health systems, you can't hide from it. The concept of ransomware is very straightforward. Criminals lock you out of your data until you pay them to regain access. That's it. So, if it's so simple, why are criminals continually finding high profile victims around the world? This crime is on the rise for one simple reason: money. It's estimated that ransomware cost companies 42 billion in 2020. Now that covers the cost of ransoms and recovery, and that actually may be a little on the low side. The average ransom has increased year over year, with the average now a little over $300,000 US. That's a startling amount given that the average ransom in 2015, just 6 years ago, was only $294, and that increased to just over $1,000 in 2017. It's obvious that criminals see opportunity here and are increasingly investing in this area. Now, on the extreme side, we've seen the highest payouts going up and up as well. In 2020, the University of California at San Francisco reportedly paid out $1.14 million after negotiating down the initial ransom demand. Travelex was also hit in 2020 and is rumored to have paid out $2.3 million in ransom as part of an attack that took systems offline for almost 2 weeks. Now, 2020 has brought even higher ransom demands as criminals are really hitting their stride. The North American division of Brenntag, a distribution company, reportedly paid out $4.4 million to recover 150 gigabytes of business critical data. At the same time, Colonial Pipeline is said to have paid out the same $4.4 million demand to the same criminal gang in order to recover their data after having shut down the fuel pipeline that serves the majority of the eastern seaboard. And topping the known list is JBS US Holdings. It's been reported by the Wall Street Journal and others that they paid out $11 million in ransom in order to restore the plants that process roughly 1/5 of the United States' meat supply. Criminals are making mountains of money with this crime, and no wonder it's happening more and more. But the ransomware payment is actually the cheaper side of the crime. The costs associated with restoring IT systems and the cost of loss to business are skyrocketing as well. After a ransomware incident, the average organization takes a little over 2 weeks to fully recover. Why does it take so long? Well, even if an organization pays the ransom and gets the keys to access their data, that process takes time. It can take days to decrypt or restore the information, and the same goes if the company has to restore from backups. And that process can only take place once the team has determined that they've removed the criminals from their network. That often requires an outside team of professional incident responders. Most organizations don't have the experience or the capacity to do a complete sweep of their systems to make sure that they're safe. So calling in a third party, that's a smart move, but it takes time and adds to the overall bill. Now, that bill usually clocks in around $1.2 million, and that number is rising quickly as these incidents grow in size. Now, keep in mind that none of these figures even start to touch the opportunity costs associated with lost business or the impact to a company's brand reputation. If your e-commerce site was down and you couldn't take any orders for 2 weeks, the numbers are going to skyrocket. No wonder this was a $42 billion problem in 2020. Let's take a step back and look at the mechanics of the crime. Ransomware mirrors the idea of a physical ransom. This is a scheme where the criminal takes possession of something. Let's say they steal a prized painting of yours. Now, there's only one of that painting. The criminal has it now, and they know that it's the only one. They're going to set a ransom that they think hits the sweet spot between what the painting is worth and what you're willing to pay to get it back. The premise here is very simple. Pay the ransom, get the painting back. Of course, 1,000 things could go wrong. The top concern for the criminal is that they need you to believe that you'll get the painting back if you pay. If at any point you don't think you're going to get the painting back, you're unlikely to pay and the criminal's unlikely to make money. That's not what they want. They also need you not to involve law enforcement, as that significantly increases the odds of them getting caught in the physical version of this crime. For larger ransoms, insurance companies and other players can get involved and can actually negotiate the payment down and even handle the exchange. This isn't a common crime, but it's pretty easy to understand. The criminal has something unique that you treasure, pay, and you'll get it back. For ransomware, the concept is the same, but in the digital world, unique is extremely rare. It's easy enough to copy a file to make a backup. Mac OS and Windows actually ask you if you want to set up automatic backups anytime you plug in a new external drive, and your phone and tablets automatically back up critical data to the cloud. This seems like it prevents ransoms, doesn't it? Well, you and I both know technology is never that simple. Organizations rarely have an effective backup strategy in place, and individuals are actually somehow less likely to have one. It's an odd failing of the human condition. So, even if you do beat the odds and have backups, denying you access to those backups is now part of the ransomware workflow. Let's dive into that workflow now to get a better idea of what happens on a technical level. Before denying you access to your data, ransomware first needs to get onto your systems. The initial entry point into a network is almost always a phishing email. In fact, 94% of all malware is delivered via phishing. It's simple, cheap, and effective as a first step for criminals. So criminals are sending out targeted phishing emails that are designed, yes, designed, to get you to click on them and then take some sort of action. Log in somewhere, download a file, run a program, that sort of thing. Once you do that, a loader or dropper works its way onto your system. That is the initial foothold that criminals need to start their scheme. With the dropper in place, the next stage is to find out where they've landed. Criminals will quietly probe your systems and try to find the most valuable data and weak points on your network. They use any number of techniques and could be in your system for days. The average dwell time on a network is now down to 24 days. Yes, down. A decade ago, it was about 416 days, and it sat around 186 days for a number of years. So 24 days is actually looking pretty good given the circumstances. Once they've identified all the weak spots and the most valuable data, it's time for them to trip the switch. Ransomware is deployed throughout your network and will try to either corrupt or block access to your backups and encrypt all your data at the same time. Encryption is a technique that we use all the time throughout computing. It's actually one of the primary ways we keep data safe. It locks the data away, and then you need a key to access it. With ransomware, do you have any guess as to who has the only key? Yeah, if you said criminals, you got it in one. A well-executed ransomware strike will ensure that you are in the same situation as a physical ransom. The only way back to your data is paying to get the key. So if we summarize this process, we actually get roughly 4 stages. We have research, land, explore, and lock. But it wasn't always this involved. The first ransomware attack was actually all the way back in 1989 and was distributed via floppy disk. The criminal mailed out 20,000 floppies to attendees of the World Health Organization's AIDS conference that year. And when an infected system ran for the 90th time, it would lock the system and demand a $189 annual payment or a $389 one-time payment be mailed to a P.O. box in Panama. It's a truly bizarre story, but as a historical note, it serves as a proof of concept. Digital extortion and ransom made real. Now, there are scattered examples in the intervening years, but ransomware really hit its current form in 2013. That year, a ransomware called CryptoLocker was targeting Windows systems. And over the course of the next year, it's estimated that the criminals behind this scheme brought in about $1.3 million. The success, from a criminal standpoint, of CryptoLocker led to an explosion of ransomware over the next few years. During this period, ransomware was very much a crime of opportunity. If a system could be infected, it was. There was little to no targeting. The goal here was just volume, which is why ransomwares were still set in the low hundreds of dollars. Criminals really had no idea who their victims were and what they could pay. The concept, though, was simple. Your data was valuable to you, at the very least. So most organizations and people at that time with computers should have been able to scrape together the ransom, and if they couldn't, well, there were always more victims. So for years, security companies were tracking hundreds of thousands of ransomware attacks and dozens of distinct technical implementations of ransomware. The trend since 2019, though, has been more targeted and precise attacks. Gone are the volume plays, as criminals realize that they actually make more money with fewer, higher value targets. Ransomware has gone up market. You'll notice throughout this video I've been saying criminals. Despite what you hear in the headlines and the questions being floated by politicians, this is a scheme perpetrated by criminals. Nation states may use ransomware attacks as a method to disguise their other activities, but they are not the ones holding companies' data for ransom. This is a profit-motivated crime. Now, don't get me wrong. Nations have a role to play in how many resources they commit from law enforcement and in other areas that they could use to help crack down on ransomware. But let's be clear, this is a law enforcement and criminal justice issue, not a cyber warfare one. So, how organized are the criminals involved? Very. Remember the four rough stages of an attack? We had research, land, explore, and lock. At each of these stages, there are products and services for sale to criminals that they can use as part of their campaigns. So, if you took a dark turn and wanted to run a ransomware campaign, it actually takes little to no technical knowledge, just startup capital. When you're researching your victim, you can buy access to their social media accounts, personal information, and more to make sure that your initial efforts are well crafted and likely to get you access to their systems. Of course, that only augments the free research you can do on social media and through the news. There is always a ton of information about organizations and their employees available online, paid or otherwise. Moving to the land step, you can actually rent services that help run the logistics of your phishing campaign, just like any other online marketing campaign. Or you could buy access to a pre hacked network directly via an initial access broker. These brokers offer existing footholds into various networks and can help you accelerate your efforts and see a profit quicker. Once you've landed, you'll need more tools in your kit to explore the network around you. Tools that allow you to compromise more systems, enumerate the data and services within a network. Well, these are already available for a price or even as open source tools made for defenders. When you're ready to lock the environment down, you can rent the malware and the entire system end to end with ransomware as a service. Yes, the criminal underground has adopted a cloud services model and has a product ready to meet every need. This is how profitable ransomware is. It spawned an entire criminal industry. Given the expansion of criminal activity, you would expect to see a massive response from law enforcement globally. And we are seeing some level of response. In the spring of 2021, several arrests were made from members of the Clop ransomware organization. And before that, we saw arrests associated with the eGregor ransomware in early 2021 and Gand Crab in the summer of 2020. These arrests, though, they were just a drop in the bucket. In reality, there is very little risk for criminals running ransomware campaigns. Why? Well, law enforcement in the digital space is a rat's nest of jurisdictional issues, technical challenges, and a lack of resources. It's not for a lack of trying. It's extremely difficult to gather sufficient evidence, cooperation, and funding to rein in the perpetrators behind these crimes. But governments are slowly turning their attention to the problem. The United States recently said that they would be treating ransomware with the same priority as terrorism. That's a good first step, but for the previously stated reasons, for now, it's more political posturing than a program that'll deliver results anytime soon. Law enforcement needs more technical resources, clear priorities, and a framework where victims can come forward without fear of increasing their own liability on a number of issues. These efforts need to start now, and they won't pay off for years. With all of the money at stake and all the headlines, companies are understandably reacting to the issue. It's an obvious risk to your business, and that includes all types of businesses. However, IT is already a cost center for most organizations, and security is typically an afterthought of those activities. On a whiteboard, ransomware can be prevented with regular patching and updates, good security controls, a strong disaster recovery plan, and an excellent security education program. The problem is that those whiteboard ideas don't at all line up with reality. On regular patching and updating, noted cybersecurity expert Kevin Beaumont put it best. Just patch is a mantra you will hear in cybersecurity circles, but I'm not sure how many people in cybersecurity have tried to patch Microsoft Exchange and SharePoint clusters. It isn't a just operation. So if we put some data to that number, 25 days after a patch is released, most organizations have only about 35% of affected systems patched. Moving out to 75 days after release, that number limps to about 55% of systems. Patching is hard, and unpatched systems are prime targets for criminals. Security controls can be a good tool to help stop the criminals at any stage in the ransomware process, but cost and complexities are an organization's enemy here. Cybersecurity solutions can be expensive. It is a $162 billion a year market after all. And even when procured, they can take a long time to deploy if you ever even get them out the door. There's no real stats on this one, but anecdotally, a lot of security professionals have seen this firsthand. Security controls are lobbied for, they're finally purchased, and then never quite deployed completely for any number of reasons. So, despite the full coverage protection on the whiteboard, this is an area where companies have blind spots, a false sense of security, and are quite vulnerable. What about disaster recovery? Well, it's a disaster in its own right. It's expensive and time consuming. Businesses rarely test their plans under perfect conditions, let alone under the stress and challenges presented by an ongoing incident. And finally, security awareness programs are typically the same regurgitated tropes time and time again. Don't click on links if you don't want to get phished. Pick a strong password to stop hackers. The security community needs to radically shift how we treat users, as they are a critical part of any security posture. For the record, don't click on links is ridiculous. That's what they were made for, and marketing links and emails look way more malicious than the worst malware out there. The most straightforward advice around phishing: if you click on a link in an email and it asks you to take an action like downloading a file, entering credentials, or something like that, then stop and ask a lot of questions about that link. Similarly, password guidance is out of date. I won't go into it here, but just remember that a strong password is actually a long passphrase. Think sentence, and you should be okay. So, this advice to businesses would be great protection against ransomware, but it's hard to completely implement for a number of reasons. It's just not realistic. Realizing these challenges, more and more businesses are turning towards cybersecurity insurance. These policies vary widely, and you have to read the fine print, but generally they have provisions to help with any potential ransom payments and recovery costs. What they usually don't cover is lost revenue from the business while you're shut down, and costs for improving your security posture with new people and tools. These policies will help you get out of your current jam financially, and will help you avoid the latest double extortion technique from criminals. This is where they not only lock you out of your data, but they also steal it. Then they threaten to release it if you don't pay the initial ransom demand. Add this all up, and more companies are paying that ransom. Making the matter worse, yes, worse, I'm sorry, 80% of businesses that pay a ransom are hit again within the year. And why not? They've already shown a willingness to pay, and odds are they haven't dramatically improved their security posture for any number of reasons. This is a profit-motivated crime. Criminals are going to do anything they can to maximize that profit. We have seen some situations where companies didn't recover given the long downtime and the massive financial expenditures during the incident. But for most organizations, a ransomware event is a major setback for a few months, and then things move on. This is something that businesses can recover from. And one of the biggest questions during that recovery is whether or not to pay the ransom. It's easy to step back and say, don't pay. But it's not that simple. If we take things from a community perspective, you shouldn't pay the ransom. The more money that criminals make, the more they invest in ransomware, continuing this cycle. But if your back is up against the wall and it's the fastest path to recover, it might make sense from a business perspective, especially with the new double extortion techniques that we're seeing. When the alternative is either a massive data breach or a long struggle to recover, the board may feel it's worth the risk to pay, even with the high attack recurrence rate. Here's a statement from the U.S. administration's lead, Ann Neuberger, on the issue. It's about as politically correct a shrug as possible. Depressingly, paying the ransom is becoming a cost of doing business activity at this point. But it shouldn't be, and it doesn't have to be. Businesses should be doing everything they can to prevent ransomware from taking hold. That means investing and ensuring that technical cybersecurity controls are deployed throughout the organization. And if you can't do it yourself, contract that work out. The same goes for monitoring those security controls. Currently, cybersecurity insurance can look like a smarter investment than that technical route. However, the current financial situation with the insurers won't stay this way forever. Insurance is also a numbers game, and more businesses are hit with ever-increasing ransoms. The baseline security posture to get insurance and the overall cost is going to continue to increase. Just as critical is to have a disaster recovery plan in place and to regularly practice it. The good news here, these plans work for any disaster and are a solid investment. The key is to figure out what's actually critical for your business. You may have a lot of systems right now that are nice and they help things run more efficiently, but in a pinch, you could probably do without them. Focusing on the core of your business will help reduce the complexity and cost of your disaster recovery plan. Regardless of the approach you take, the key is to do it now, not when you've been hit with a ransomware attack. By then, it's way too late. Ransomware isn't going anywhere. Criminals are just making too much money too easily to stop anytime soon. Expect to see more and more industries targeted as criminals take advantage of overly complicated IT deployments, poor security messaging, and a lack of community focus on the issue. The 2021 attack of Kaisia, an IT management platform, is an example of what to expect. This firm offers a product that helps other companies manage the IT operations of their clients. Criminals associated with the REvil ransomware managed to breach the company and then use its own tooling to deploy ransomware to those service providers. By attacking one company in the supply chain, they managed to successfully breach dozens of others. The impact was felt far and wide, with one of the most visible victims being the co op supermarket chain in Sweden. They shut down almost 500 stores in order to deal with the attack. These type of supply chain attacks offer a really high return on investment for criminals. Similarly, companies in the energy sector, manufacturing, and other key verticals are very attractive targets for criminals. These companies all have large, complex IT systems and need to keep operations running 24/7. They're likely to pay big when attacked and are already in the crosshairs for enterprising criminals. So, what can we do? Well, this is not an easy problem to solve. There are so many interconnected concerns and challenges that honestly, it's going to take years to unwind it all. But what we do know is this: we need international focus and cooperation and support of law enforcement on this issue. Businesses also need to do everything they reasonably can to prevent ransomware from taking hold in the first place. And we all need to realize that there's always going to be attacks, and you have to have a well practiced plan in place to recover quickly. We aren't going to stop ransomware tomorrow, but if we work together and take steps to prevent it from taking hold, we can at least slow it down.